So all of us really admire bodhisattvas. We aspire to generate bodhicitta. And sometimes we get so excited about the idea of helping others that we get ourselves very involved in lots of different things. Running here, running there, doing this, doing that, sharing the Dharma here, talking about the Dharma there. Yeah, publishing books here, printing prayer flags over there, doing this and that. And we're so busy, but that we forget about our own practice. So it's very important if we sincerely want to help others to not lose ourselves in some kind of uh, hyper, what is it? Hyper, I'm going to save everybody attitude. And remember that our ability to be of benefit depends on who we are as a human being, not just knowing the right words and so on. And so we have to really not forget about our own practice and not skip over looking at our own minds. And Venerable Jigme made one statement that really hit me today when she said, "It's going to be hard no matter what I do. If I live a lay life, it's going to be difficult. If I ordain, it will also be difficult." So lay life is difficult because samsara always hits on us and is quite wearying. Ordained life can be difficult when we have to tame this crazy elephant of our mind. But if we look for the results of those two, there's quite a big difference. We can endure the difficulties of samsara to get what we want, but then we separate from it all when we die. Or we can take delight in dealing with the difficulties of practice, and then when we die, we have a feeling of having really lived a meaningful life and can rejoice in having made progress on the path. So let's keep that in mind. And try and learn the teachings, contemplate them, and meditate on them with a sincere motivation, lots of joy, and a good amount of patience and fortitude. So in discussing the various categories of precepts, there's we have to exercise some patience and fortitude in freeing ourselves from wrong notions that we may have about the precepts. And I remember in one of our monastic gatherings, with all the different traditions, Bhikkhu Bodhi made the comment that we should not call the precepts vows, that's incorrect. Yeah, because a vow in our culture means thou shalt not break it. Okay? Whereas a precept is a training, it's something that we are training, that we are practicing, that we use to guide our life. Okay? So transgressions will happen. You know, that doesn't mean that we just say, well, yeah, of course, and don't purify and don't care about the transgressions. That's not a good attitude. But what it does mean is to really think that these are trainings and guidelines. And so not to approach the precepts with a Christian mind of, if you don't keep these properly, you know where you're going. Yeah, because that kind of idea is not in Buddhism at all. Repeat. Okay, that idea of punishment, of somebody else setting up the rules and we better keep them or else, that notion is not included in Buddhism. Okay, so karma functions. It's a like a natural law, in the sense like gravity is. It's a cause and effect kind of thing. The Buddha did not make up the law of karma. Okay, he simply described it. And then in doing so, he talked about, when these results come, these are the kind of actions that were the cause. So he described all of that. And from that came the precepts, which are recommendations to be followed. But the Buddha does not reward and punish us. And if we could keep the precepts 100% perfectly, we wouldn't need to take them. Okay? So the thing of confessing our mistakes and restoring the precepts is built into the very notion of what they are. Okay? So you practice them, you confess when you goof, you restore them, you learn, you continue. Okay? And so that's quite important to remember, that we should not go around with feelings of guilt. I'm so bad. What did I do? No, we acknowledge our mistakes and we learn from them. That's the important part, is that we learn. Okay? So last time we went over the nature of the precepts, and then we talked about the divisions of the precepts. Okay? So we talked about 8 kinds of precepts. So 3 of them pertain to lay people. It's called the fasting, the first one, the fasting precept, but it's actually the 8 one-day precepts. Okay, which I said last time is they're similar to the 8 Mahayana precepts, but they're not the same. Yeah, the motivation is different, and a few of the details are different. And then you have male and female precepts, the 5 precepts. And we'll get into that this time, because there's ways where you take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or just at refuge, or, there's different ways to do it. And then the male and female novice or shramanera precepts, the training precepts for nuns, and then the bhikshu and bhikshuni full ordination precepts. Okay. Yeah, in this one he used the Tibetan terms. I tend to use Sanskrit terms for those things. Okay, so we went over, just to review, the 8 precepts, the 8 one-day precepts. Okay, so the first 4 are like the four of the upasaka, upasika lay precepts. Okay, and to actually, not the first 4, 4 of the 5, 4 of the first 5. Okay, killing, stealing, lying, and taking intoxicants are the same precepts, taken for a different period, a different length of time, And then the one of that in the lay precepts is the avoiding, here he said improper sex. What, there's proper sex? Are you giving us a lesson? There's some translations I just don't resonate with. Okay, but and it's often called sexual misconduct, which I don't like that translation either. But it means, not being considerate of your partner and not being considerate of yourself and the mental and emotional health of both yourself and the partner. And so that's what it means for the 5 lay precepts. And for the one-day precepts, then it's celibacy. Okay? Celibacy, just for one day, you can do it. Okay? Lama Yeshe used to say, you people make such a big deal about sex. But if you add up all the time in your life when you're having sex and all the time when you're not, you don't really spend much time having sex. If you think about it, in 24 hours a day, okay, you can do the math on your own situation. Yeah, but he said, why do you think about it so much? It does, it's not really that big of a thing in your life. Okay, so as he put it here, okay, the root 4 are unchastity, theft, taking life, and speaking lies. Theft also, it gives you the idea of breaking into somebody's house, of being a thief. Yeah, but a lot of things that are considered stealing in our conventional society don't make you a thief. Okay, so what words you use are important because it could give people really the wrong ideas. Okay, and then the branch 4s are sitting or sleeping on high or luxurious beds or thrones, eating food at improper times, song, dance, watching entertainment, and wearing ornaments and perfumes and things like that. Okay, so we'll go over those in more depth in the next category when we start talking about the upasaka and upasika, the lay precepts. Okay, so you don't have this one, do you? Okay, so then the next section is talking about the lay precepts. Okay, and to steal, what's her translation? Mm-hmm. Okay, Oh, she uses theft also. Killing, stealing, lying, unkind, and what's the word I usually say? Yeah, unkind and unwise sexual conduct, intoxicating drink. Okay, so those are the ones. So killing, if it's going to be a break from the root where you need to restore the precept afterwards, it involves killing a human being, you know, and you intend to kill that human being, you kill the one you intend to kill, and you are happy about it, and that person dies before you do. Okay? If you kill an animal, that's not a root transgression. Okay? But we still need to purify it. Stealing is taking something of value in the place where you live such that the law could get involved. So this is going to depend on the country where you live. Yeah, because one thing is very valuable in one country and it's not very valuable in another country. So you would get arrested in one place, but not arrested or prosecuted in another place. Okay. And then lying, so that is the root transgression. When the law gets involved, you're saying something of worth that the law gets involved. Yeah. So then you need to restore the precept. Then the minor transgression is like borrowing something and not returning it, taking something of lesser value than, so the law wouldn't really get involved. Okay, so things like that. Okay, then the third one is unwise or unkind sexual comportment, yeah, which was defined as incontinence here, which no, that's not it. Okay, do people know what incontinence is? Okay, yeah. Okay, so this is the precept in the West. Westerners go totally berserky over this precept, and there's always, especially in India with the young travelers, well, but here too, and and everybody has 10,000 questions about it. Yeah. Okay, so this too, I think, depends on the culture and depends on the time period. Okay, because yeah, what is considered proper, I don't want to use proper, wise and kind in one culture, in one time period, is unwise and unkind in another. Okay, so to give some examples of that, in India, ancient India, the men often had not concubines, courtesans, and that was considered okay. Prostitution was okay. In China, ancient China, well, even modern China, you could have more than one wife. Okay. In Tibet, there was polyandry where the women usually could marry more than one man, and that was a way of keeping wealth in the same family. Okay. So in those countries, in those cultures, those things were deemed okay. Yeah. In our culture, I don't think they would work. Yeah. In fact, I know they wouldn't work. In fact, when I heard one of my teachers talk about the third precept, okay, and he was doing it straight from Vasubandhu, because Vasubandhu was the one who set out all the details about what you can do and what you can't. The Buddha didn't set out the details so much. That came later with Vasubandhu. Okay, so my teacher was explaining this, and he was saying, if if somebody else pays for a prostitute, but you sleep with her, that is breaking this precept. I nearly went through the ceiling when I heard that, okay, because the implication was there's nothing wrong with prostitution, okay. Looking at prostitutions from a woman's viewpoint, there's a whole lot that's harmful in it, okay, a whole lot, okay. Looking at it from a man's point, which Vasubandhu was, then, whatever, okay. Then somebody will say, well, what about people who choose to be sex workers? If they actually choose and they're not forced into that by poverty or by sexual trafficking or by their parents selling them to somebody else, in other words, they really want to do that, then it's one thing, it's voluntary. Yeah. But in so many situations for women and also for young boys, people are forced into it, and it's extremely harmful to them physically and mentally. Yeah. So, looking at it from that viewpoint, from our culture, where we do not believe that if you have a lot of children, you sell one of your children to somebody who will take them to be a sex worker. Yeah. We have quite a different culture regarding that. Yeah. Or where kids run away from home and they're in the bus station and somebody comes and picks them up and makes them into a sex worker. And often what happens in those situations is they first get them hooked on drugs, and then to pay for their drugs, the pimp makes them, do his biting. Okay, so it's clearly, from our cultural viewpoint, this is not something that is acceptable. In ancient India, it was. Okay, so here we have to, I think, interpret things different than how Vasubandhu did. Okay, another one, Alex Burson actually wrote quite a bit about that. So if you really want to read his ideas for revamping and modernizing that precept, he talks about it, and he talks about the cultural differences. For example, in ancient India, a family lived in one building that usually didn't have rooms, or it had maybe a kitchen area and then the bedroom where everybody slept. Okay, so one of the things Vasubandhu said is don't have sex during the daytime. Why not? Because everybody's supposed to be out working the fields, and instead, if you're at home, having sex and somebody comes in for a glass of water, it's not going to, you're going to be embarrassed. They're going to be embarrassed. Okay. In our culture, that isn't the point. Okay. I don't think we worry about people being out in the fields and coming in and, on somebody. But if we're going to make that precept apply to our culture, then we have to consider STDs. Yeah. And if there's danger of, if you have an STD, of passing it to somebody, or somebody else may have one, or you don't even know if they have one, then it's important to use protection so that you don't spread a sexually transmittable disease to somebody else. And being flippant about that and saying, well, I don't care, and that that you have, well, I don't care, and he doesn't seem to care, she doesn't seem to care, that's not a very good attitude, is it? Because these kinds of diseases are serious. Also, there was a discussion once when there was a meeting of Western Buddhist teachers with His Holiness. Of course, this precept came up. So somebody was saying to His Holiness that the way Thich Nhat Hanh talks about it is not having affection for your partner, you know? And His Holiness remarked, well, that's not strictly written in the rule. Okay. But he said that makes a lot of sense. And it does make sense because you see that if, and in many cultures, sex is just, what you do. There's not much emotional involvement. Okay. And so, so if people really don't have any emotional involvement, that's one thing. But here, people usually have some kind of emotional involvement. And so you may say to each other, no, we're just hooking up. There's no commitment. There's nothing. We don't have any, feelings for each other. We're just enjoying sex. That's it. You talk about it beforehand. You agree. It's just that. Okay. And then the relationship continues, and one person keeps that in mind. This is just sex, no commitment. Meanwhile, the other person's getting attached and developing feelings. Okay? So being inconsiderate about that, if you just say, well, we decided, it's just pure sex, we're just hooking up, and I don't care if they're getting attached to me, that's their business, we agreed not to do it. Something's not right. You don't really care about that person's feelings and what's happening to them. And then when the whole thing breaks up, as relationships usually do, then somebody's hurt emotionally, or somebody feels used, and they have been used. Okay, so to be careful of that. So that's why I call it unwise, because of the sexually transmitted diseases, and unkind for not taking into consideration the other person's emotions or your own emotions, okay, for that matter. Yeah. And so, nowadays there's quite a big hookup culture. We had a situation, we often have the situation of two young women here. And one of them told me a story about a conversation that she had with another one. And they were both like early 20s, mid 20s. And one of them said to the other, we're young and we're supposed to have a lot of hookups and a lot of sexual relationships and enjoy our lives. And the other one said, because that wasn't her way of thinking at all. Okay. So she was actually rather shocked that this other one felt that way. Okay, so some really care about the person, your own and the other person's physical health and mental, emotional health. Okay, but Vasubandhu doesn't talk about that. Okay, and I think that this is in some way, I talked to somebody about it, I forget who, one of the reasons why these scandals occur, because in Tibetan society, I was told, sex is just an animal act and it doesn't have to involve feelings for somebody else. So if you get situations of people breaking their precepts, I'm talking about monks here, and using some big to get somebody to go to bed with them, because from his viewpoint it's just sex. From her viewpoint, she's been hooked in. because often they'll say, oh, if you have sex with me, you get a special blessing. And even he doesn't say that. If it's a lama, then, it's like, oh, then I'm special. The teacher pays a lot of attention to me. I must be, maybe I'm almost a dakini. Maybe I have spiritual realizations. They just haven't come out yet. And he's paying all this attention to me, so I'm better than everybody else. It's foolishness on the woman's part, but many people get hooked into things that way. And then you have somebody who doesn't have any respect for their own precepts. And then they have sex and put their robes on the next day. And that is, if a monk does that, they are no longer a monk, period, no bargaining about it, And this is a problem, in different traditions where, people, because in Tibetan culture, if somebody is a lama, or anybody actually in Tibetan culture, you don't want to make them lose face. So especially if somebody has a high title and they're regarded very well, if you say, oh, they parajikad, oh, what are you talking about it for? You're the woman, it's your fault. You seduced him, which is, what happens in this country too, isn't it? Which the Me Too movement really started to bring out in the open and complain about, not complain, but, say, look, this is not good. But even now, and not just in cases of somebody seducing somebody like that, but even with rape, a lot of the women are hesitant to report it because then they get cross-examined about their own personal details and their own sex life. And, it's like the woman is on trial, not the man, when she reports a rape. So, so this is the kind of thing that needs to be talked about and spoken about in Tibetan circles and called out. Yeah. And when you call it out, I mean, what happened with one of the lamas, is a group of the bhikshunis, we got together and we said, we didn't say he's guilty. We said we want an impartial investigation. Even calling for an impartial investigation, many people criticized us. We didn't say he was guilty. We just want an impartial investigation. And so we got letters from some of our Dharma friends who we've known for years and years saying, you're breaking your tantric samaya by, calling for an investigation, or, you are committing incredible negative karma by criticizing your teacher. We weren't criticizing, okay? But it was very interesting how so much, there were factions that formed in the organization. The one faction that said you have to have pure view. It's a lama, you have pure view, he's doing it because he's a bodhisattva, for some reason. None of us understand what that reason is, but it's some benevolent, kind reason, and so don't say anything. And so one party says that, and then another half of the group says, wait a minute, they have a vow of celibacy. Doesn't that matter? Doesn't that matter? Are you saying that we can just break our precepts anyway and it doesn't matter at all? There's no accountability. And so then there's a big problem because, uh, I mean, I know people too come right off to my attention immediately who disrobed, not because they, uh, the Lama had sex with them, but because they felt they could no longer represent a tradition that did not hold people accountable. Yeah. And that was a tragedy as I regarded it. And I think my perspective is I think they made a mistake in doing that because your ordination is between you and the Buddha, and you are not representing a tradition such that if somebody else in the tradition messes up, you need to feel humiliated or shameful or something like that. You know, if somebody messes up and somebody comes to you and says, is this true? If you know it's true, then you say, yes, it's true, you know, and then you help the person process their emotions about it, and you explain to them how to see the situation so that they don't create anger uh, and so that they don't get disillusioned, because that kind of disillusionment is very harmful to somebody's practice, especially if they had faith in somebody and then discover that that person's been sleeping around, and it's like, do I trust them? I mean, they're teaching the Dharma, but do I really trust what they're saying is Dharma if they're acting like this? So that behavior is very, very harmful. And so you have to help people not fall into cynicism and not fall into rationalization. Okay. But the best way is keep your precepts, especially this one. And then you avoid all the amazing confusion that comes because of that. And I talk about this quite openly because I really learned from that experience. Uh, when we ask for an investigation, that it needs to be talked about. Yeah. I mean, just for example, one one young woman she told me she was in Nepal and she was studying with one of the groups in Nepal. And one very high Lama kind of invited her to come to his room in the evening. He didn't say what, he just, come to my room and we can chat. And she said to me, I felt funny about doing that, so I told him no. Did I make a mistake and I should have gone? And I looked at her, I said, no, you made a good decision. But that's the kind of thing that happens where if somebody is noted as a high Lama, then the woman feels like, oh, I did something wrong by not doing what he said, because you're supposed to follow your Lama's instructions. But, it says if the Lama is telling you to do something unethical, you don't follow the instructions. And there's no fault on your own if you don't. Okay. So, but it's quite sad. The whole thing continues, and it's, it was brought out in the open in the 90s, like early mid 90s, and it's still continuing. And it's a mess. Yeah, and people lose faith from the side of the Tibetans. It's people tend to respect the Tibetans because they, the Shangri-La image. If you're familiar with the Shangri-La projection, everybody who's Tibetan is a holy being. Okay. Well, it damages that. And I think it's good that it be damaged, but not in that way. Okay. Okay, let's go on. See, I told you we can talk about sex for a long time. Okay, so next one, intoxicants. So I think I talked about this one before. So this doesn't mean just alcohol. It's recreational drugs. It's anything that alters the state of your mind. Okay, and it includes prescription drugs, even if you started out needing them and got them legally, but you continue taking them afterwards when you don't need them. Okay, so these 5 are abandoned by the lay followers. Here it says vows. Precepts. Okay, sometimes for a set of precepts, you can use the term vow, but there it would be singular, like the lay person's vow, referring to all 5 precepts. Yeah, but sometimes it's just easier to say the lay person's precepts. The vow is a very confusing word, don't you think? Yeah, it kind of can give people the wrong idea. Okay, so lay followers of 6 types. So 6 types of lay followers. So those who practice one, some, okay, so one precept, it could be any precept, some precepts, meaning like 2 of them, most rules, which would be 3 or 4 of them, or completely, that's, all 5 of them. And then the 5th kind is where you take lay precepts, all 5 precepts with celibacy. Yeah, so that's one. And then somebody who just takes refuge is the 6th one. Okay, so people can choose how many precepts they want to take. Okay, so they are lay followers who, in order, abandon 1, 2, 3 of the 4 roots. Okay, unwise and unkind sexual behavior, which would mean all 5, and celibacy, or just refuge. So that's just repeating what I said. Okay, is that clear? No, what's not clear? What? Okay, that somebody keeps 1 precept. Okay, they keep some precepts, like 2 of them. Okay, they keep most precepts, like 3 or 4 of them. They keep all 5, which is the 4th one. And the 5th one is they keep all 5 together with celibacy. And then the 6th one is they just take refuge. Okay. Okay. Oh, so the question that often comes up about intoxicants is what happens if you're taking homeopathic medicine that is, it's kept fresh by putting it in alcohol. Before you take it, you just put the drops in hot water, the alcohol evaporates, and then you take the medicine. Then people say, what about cooking with alcohol? Well, if you cook it and it evaporates, you're not breaking the precept. Okay. However, if you like just the smell or taste of the alcohol, then I would stay away from cake that's baked with it, because it may bring up that longing for the taste. Okay. So that's fairly clear. Now, somebody's going to say, okay, they're going to quote what His Holiness says. So His Holiness tells the story about Ling Rinpoche, who's his senior tutor, and posed that question to Ling Rinpoche, because somebody said, well, I really can't give up all the alcohol I'm drinking. The Tibetan alcohol is called chang, okay? I don't want to give up all, I can't really give up all the chang. So Ling Rinpoche told that person, then just drink less, okay? So His Holiness, when he gives the precept, he tells that story, and he says, so just drink less. Then, but actually in the scriptures, the Buddha said not one drop. Not one drop that's the size of a dewdrop. Yeah? So that's pretty small. So why does His Holiness say that? He is speaking to a huge public gathering. Yeah, he's giving the precepts to a huge public gathering. Yeah, with many different people of many different levels of practice, different dispositions. So he loosens it a little bit so that everybody can feel, okay, I'll just drink less. And that helps that person. They do drink less. Okay. But, if you're taking it on an individual level, I don't know. Definitely when he gives the monastic precepts, it's no alcohol. When I give the precepts, it is no alcohol at all. Okay. And I think that is actually much easier for people, because if you say you can drink, but just don't get drunk, well, you don't know that you've broken the precept until you are drunk, And so, because you just keep drinking, thinking, well, I'm not intoxicated, I'm not drunk, so I'll just keep drinking. I'm not breaking the precept by getting drunk. But then by the time you need to stop, you've already broken it, okay? And, the disadvantages of intoxicants, my goodness, we can go on and on about that. The health, what it does to your health is one thing, okay? But I'll tell you one story that really, it's a good story. It's a tragedy, but it's a good story to bring the point home. So one lady, I was in Montana, she was driving me I was giving a teaching in one of the Billings, Montana, someplace. And so it was a long car ride, so we were talking. And so she told me the story. She and her husband had a son, okay? And their son got in a horrible car accident. He was drunk. And, well, actually, before that, he and his father, this is how father-son bonded, is they would drink together. Montana, cowboy country, you have a 6-pack of beer and you sit down and watch a football game or whatever, and so that's how father and son bonded. So the son, started drinking just like the father, and the father had he had a 6-pack, but then he had all these fancy kind of alcohol things too. So the son was in this horrible traffic accident, and he was drunk. The son was put on a vent, and he was artificially kept alive. And there were 3 people in the other car, and they were killed. Okay. And so here's the mother and father with their child, who they, of course, love, who is on life support. And the doctors, and it's hard keeping somebody on life support. It's also expensive keeping them on life support. So the doctors at one point said, you do want to take him off the life support. Can you imagine being a parent who loves a child and you are faced with that decision of taking your kid off of life support? I mean, that is just excruciating for a parent. The mother is telling me this story. So they agreed, yes, they have to take him off life support. The doctor pulled the plug, the son died. Yeah. The father went home and his whole collection of alcohol bottles, brandy and whiskey and everything. He had this whole collection that was on a shelf in the house, you know. He went home, his son's dead. He went home and he went and knocked all those bottles on the floor. Yeah, so I don't think I need to say much more about the disadvantages of drinking. Or other intoxicating drugs. Yeah, it's not just booze. Okay, then what are we at? Okay, so that's the 5, right? Be okay with the 5? We can move on? Okay. So those 3 levels of ordination, yeah, the 8 precepts, which, by the way, when you become an anagarika here at the Abbey, you're taking those 8 pratimoksha precepts. You're taking the 8 one-day precepts, and you set the time limit for how long you're keeping them. Some people just say the rest of my life. Some people say, well, anagarikas for a year, I will keep them for a year. People can decide, okay? Then the next set of, yeah? Mm-hmm. The 3rd precept is unwise and unkind sexual. 4th precept, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Does it include divisive speech and harsh words and
Idle talk.
yes, and idle talk?
Some people say it does. Yeah. Usually it's not described that way, but if you want to understand, I would say the demarcation of breaking it would refer only to lying. But if you want to expand the meaning of that precept, then it would include the other 3 non-virtues. Okay? In the same way, for example, like when Thich Nhat Hanh talks about the precept of intoxication, he includes in that television, yeah, internet, anything that you are addicted to, that you waste your time doing. Okay, so he expands the meaning of that precept, but literally it's talking about intoxicating substances. Okay. Oh, so I didn't explain the one about lying. Let me do that. So here, the root infraction for lying is lying about your spiritual attainments. Yeah. And you might think, oh, well, there's so many. I mean, isn't what Donald Trump is doing, isn't that much worse than lying about your spiritual attainments? Not necessarily, especially from a Buddhist perspective. I'll tell you the story of this one, how this precept originated in the monastic sets of precepts. So there was a famine in one land, and of course the Sangha is going around and on alms, and there's a famine, and so they're not getting much food. Yeah. But at the end, and this was during Varsa, so it was for the 3-month period of Varsa. Then afterwards, they went to see the Buddha, and some monks were just, they were very, very thin. But then there was a certain group of monks, it was probably the 6 naughty monks, yeah, who came, and they were rather plump. And the Buddha said, there was a famine in the land. How come you look so, well fed and healthy? And they said, well, we told the people that we had samadhi. We told them that all the gods came and bowed to us in our meditation. We told them that we could tell fortunes and read minds. And all the people thought that we had high realizations, and so they gave us food. Well, the Buddha really gave it to them. Okay. Why? What's so bad about that? You could say, well, that was kind of smart. They kept themselves fat and healthy. They didn't starve to death during the famine. But what did they do? They abused the faith and the trust of the lay people. Yeah? And that's really serious. If you've taken precepts and you abuse their trust by pretending to be something you're not. In their case, pretending to have realizations. So the monks who were practicing purely were thin because they didn't get a lot of alms, but these monks were fat and jolly. Yeah. But that was the situation that the Buddha used for forming the precepts. Yeah. Nothing with now, what about Donald Trump? Well, that situation, the Buddha didn't have any disciples who were politicians, who did that kind of thing. Yeah. If he had had disciples who did that, who were politicians at the same time as being monastics and lied about their attainments in order to get votes or do something like that, then I would imagine there would be a precept about it. Okay. But this one is the one that is breaking the root precept. All the other lies, like the little white lies, don't you love that? The little white lies that we tell out of compassion for other people because we don't want to hurt their feelings. Yeah. And I realized what actually in Asian culture, the definition of lying is different than for us. Yeah, because I had, some people, they told me one thing and then I found out another and I asked them. I asked them about it and it was like, oh, well, we don't consider that lying. Well, I sure considered it lying because in our culture, if you say something that is not, that is not true with the intention of deceiving somebody, that's lying. Okay. So when I talk about the precepts in our culture, I think that includes little white lies. Yeah. And little white lies also are so stupid because, first of all, they destroy trust in a relationship. Any kind of lying destroys trust, but especially little white lies. If you told the truth, it probably wouldn't even disturb the other person's mind at all. Yeah. I had one friend tell me one of what they considered a little white lie. And I thought, why didn't he just tell me the truth? I would not have been upset. There was no need to lie. Yeah. And in fact, personally speaking, if somebody lies to me, that indicates they don't trust me. Yeah, that they think I'm going to crumble if I know the truth. I'm an adult. I can handle the truth. I've heard enough stuff where I can handle it. If you think that out of compassion, you know, you don't want to tell me the truth, that's your problem. And I think it's really rather insulting if somebody can't tell me the truth. But very often we don't tell the truth because we're afraid of what other people are going to think about us. Yeah. Okay. Now, but this question comes a lot too. What about you want to go to the Dharma Center to practice? And this question comes up with young people and with people in Asia. You want to go to the Dharma Center to practice, but you live in the house with your parents, and your parents want you to stay home. Yeah, but there's no reason for you to stay home. You want to go, but they just don't want you to go to the temple. Okay? And so do I lie and go to the temple? There's ways of doing things where you do not have to tell a lie. Okay? You just say, for example, in that case, I'm going out with friends. And then you go to the temple with some friends. You're telling the truth. I'm going out with some friends. Yeah. Where are you going? We're going to go, have some tea. Or no, what are you doing with your friends? You're not having tea. We're going to go, whatever you're going to do with your friend. We're going to go out with our friends, have, and eat something. And then you just make sure after the Dharma teaching, you go out with your friends. You're not lying. Okay? So, and then the example I really like to give is, okay, grandma, yeah, just cooked the exact food that you cannot stand. Okay? Grandma invites you over to dinner. It's the dish that you really don't like, but you want to be polite, so you eat it. Okay? And in the middle of the meal, Grandma says, how do you like the food? So what are you going to do? Say, well, I have precept to tell the truth. So I'm going to say, Grandma, this stuff stinks. Don't ever cook this again when you invite me over. I would not recommend saying that to your grandma, okay? But what is she really asking when she says, do you like the food? What does she really want to know? Think about it for a minute. Yeah. What does she really want to know? She's saying, I love you. I cook this meal to show that I love you. Are you understanding that I love you? And do you reciprocate that? That's her real question. Yeah. Whether the noodles taste good or not is not, she doesn't really care. Yeah. She is expressing her love, and she wants to know if you understood that. Yeah. And if you care for her. So you don't have to say, Grandma, I can't stand the food. You say, Grandma, you spent, all afternoon cooking, and it was so kind of you to invite me over. And I really like spending the evening with you, and I appreciate the invitation. And I appreciate, what we share. And that really answers what her real question. And I think it brings much more satisfaction in her heart than if you lie and say, like this tastes like, you know. Okay. So it's actually, even if it's a situation where it doesn't involve actual lying, it's good to listen for what people are actually saying. Sometimes what they're saying when they ask a question, sometimes what they're really saying even when they make a statement. So you try to listen. What is the real meaning of what's being said? And then reply to that. Okay. Any questions about the, yeah.
For your example with the Dharma Center and what you could say, I just want to share what my son says to me, who's a teenager. So I say, "Oh, where are you going?" Here and there. What are you going to do? This and that. And then it works because I can't ask any
And
more
I
questions.
bet that's what he says when you ask him where he's going.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what he says to me.
Yeah.
Those are his replies. So you could use that for a Dharma Center
Yeah.
because the parent really can't go any further with that.
Yeah, right.
But he says it with a very cheerful voice, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, he doesn't go to a Dharma Center.
I had one friend, and she was she liked to come to all the teachings, and her kids, of course, liked to go out, and play with their friends and do things with their friends. She had teenagers, but they didn't like when mom went out when they were home. It was okay when they went out when mom was home, but when they were home, they wanted mom there. Not so fair. Okay. Anything else? Yeah. Oh, now we're going to get true confessions.
Venerable, yeah, this is a confession. So let's say that there is a transgression that we are aware, and then we are not honest about it. Like, is it considered as a lying, even though that we kept it inside, or even like we have an untrue feeling, even though the person say it to us, but we are not speaking our true feeling?
Oh, you mean the person is saying to you, "Are you telling a lie? Are you telling me the truth?" And you say, "Oh yes," but you're not.
Yeah.
Well, is that a lie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, for example, it's a feeling like, okay, for example, the person, are you okay? Actually, you're not okay, but you're saying like, yes, yes, I'm okay.
Yeah. It depends what okay means to you. Okay. If you're not okay and you really need help, and so you say, I'm okay, and then you take 3 steps and you fall over, then you lied. But if you're not, you have an upset stomach, but it's not that bad, then okay could mean, yeah, I'm okay to get home or something like that. So you have to see what it is, and what your motivation is. Do you not want to admit that you have an upset stomach? Is somehow that humiliating to say, no, I'm not okay. I don't feel well.
So my one is more on like, I was like thinking I just nod my head, but I didn't actually bite. I just nod my head, but inside is actually lying. So it's still
nodding
considered.
your head is saying, yes, that's true. It doesn't have to come out of your mouth. It's considered a non-virtuous speech, but here speech means communication. So you can, an email is speech, a letter is speech, nodding your head, waving your hand, all these are considered speech. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So the Buddha created the precepts in response to certain events. So what did Vasubandhu do?
He elaborated the details of what the precepts were. Okay, he went into more detail about what actually consisted of a root transgression and what was a minor misdeed. Okay, and then all the Vinaya masters also, they wrote lots of books about it. Okay.
Just want to confirm that the root transgression of the third lay precept would be adultery. Is that right?
Yes. Well, it's if you're in a relationship, you go with somebody who it doesn't matter if they're in a relationship or not, but you're in one. Or if you're single, the other no, if you're single, the other person's in a relationship. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean this is the standard textbook answer. If you were to ask me personally about it, I would include, some of the unwise and unkind things in there. Okay, but that's me personally doing it. So I don't want people to say, oh, well, it's not a root transgression if I just go off and have a one-night stand. So it's just not a root transgression. I'll just confess it and nobody will know the difference and it's okay. No, it's not. I mean, karmically, it's not, but what are you doing to your own mind and body, and what are you doing to the other person's mind and body? Yeah. Okay. And if we've broken, like in the posada for the monastics, if we remember something we did, but we don't declare it, that's considered lying. Okay. So we should make sure we declare things. If you forget it, then you've forgotten it, then you tell somebody later.
So just clarifying what Stephen said, the root precept about sex is when being unfaithful.
Yeah.
Just like that.
That is for lay people.
For lay people, yeah.
Or, you're in a relationship,
Yeah.
or they're in a relationship.
Yeah. But if I took the precepts from you, how do I keep them?
Yeah.
That precept specifically.
Precept, I would really prefer that if people took it from me, if they have sex and they're not with a partner that they know very well or whatever, or they think there's a danger, that they use protection, so that there's no transmission of sexual diseases, and that they don't just have casual sex jumping in bed with somebody. Yeah. But that's for me. Okay, it's not the actual detail of the precept. Mm-hmm. You're getting a woman's view of the third precept. Yeah. I think men's view of the third precept is a bit different.
I want to go in the opposite direction. So
Okay.
if that's the standard of what a root break is, I would assume that, for instance, rape is also a root break, right?
Undoubtedly.
It's not usually discussed, and
it's not discussed, but certainly forcing, yourself on somebody is a root break. Yeah.
And if someone is the victim of rape, does that impact their precepts?
The standard way of explaining it, is if you experience any pleasure at all. Okay? Because it can happen that even though you are fighting like crazy, just physically your body responds. Okay? Personally speaking, I think if the body responds, but mentally you are fighting like mad and you do not want this, I wouldn't consider that a transgression. I don't think anybody who's raped, a man or a woman, is looking forward to it. Their body may do one thing, but them personally, no. Okay. Mm-hmm. See, I told you lots of questions about this precept.
Sorry. And when do we break the root precept of killing?
When you
Only when we kill a human
human
person?
being, that is a complete break of it. That's breaking it from the root.
Yes.
But when you, euthanize a pet or exterminate the insects or things like that, that's also a transgression, but more of a minor one.
Okay. And stealing, it's only when it's the law, as you said?
Yeah.
That's the root?
Yeah. Yeah. In ancient India, they specified how many Indian coins, but they don't even we don't know how much those Indian coins are worth, and it's not the point. So now it's usually described as when the law gets involved. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't it also include getting others to do those activities? Asking someone to kill for you, asking someone to steal for you. I thought that was also a root transgression.
Yeah, usually that is. Except the one for sex, that doesn't count. That one you have to do yourself.
It's a Singaporean thing that we always, okay. So something I learned here is the transparency whereby I say I'm working with my mind and I'm okay. But if I need help, I will go to someone. Like we will be very specific. So this is what I learned something here.
Yeah.
To share with Ken.
Yeah. I mean, because we all get stuck and we can say, I'm kind of okay, but I need some help. Yeah. And that's good because then other people in the community can reach out and help you. And actually, when you say that, it saves other people from pointing out your faults, your misdeed. Okay. So for those of you who haven't heard this story, here's another one. So I won't tell you who it concerns, but it concerns, it was early on when the Abbey was quite new. And there was one nun who was here who was in a really bad mood for a couple of weeks. And it was very apparent she was in a bad mood. So we were having, I forget if it was a confession, if we were confessing, or if we were having a community meeting when we were going around and talking. And she said, she was one of the first people, she said, I've been in a really bad mood. I've been very angry the last couple of weeks. And a lot of you many of you have been the victim of my anger, the recipient of my anger, and I apologize. So she said that at the beginning. By her saying that, no one pointed out, well, in the last 2 weeks you said this and you were angry about that, and how dare you talk to me this way and talk to that. If she hadn't had said it, then people would have said, if she didn't admit that she was angry, for that period of time and spoke really poorly, then people would have pointed that out to her. And I think that would have been a lot more painful to her and difficult for other people. But she just said it flat out at the beginning. And as a result, everybody said thank you, and nobody pointed to point out specific instances to her.